So one mistake that a lot of teachers make when they're in a classroom setting is they think that their lecture needs to be a monologue, when actually a dialogue between themselves and the students may be way more effective in getting their message across.
Adults don't learn very much from somebody just standing up and talking. Actually, we learn best talking to each other. So, discussion, whenever you're teaching something, is one of the best tools that we can lean into so that people walk away with something concrete.
There's nothing worse than being super bored in a classroom when you're just sitting there listening to somebody tell you all their great ideas and all their great experiences, and you have no place to respond. You have no place to be engaged in the conversation or to participate. I find it really frustrating and really like discouraging and demotivating as a learner.
Right. And if I'm hearing something like new or maybe a little controversial, I need some time to like think and chew and I'm often verbal. So I'm often like, "Well, I like this, but I don't. What do you think?" And somebody next to me might have another point of view. That's where I feel like I'm really learning, and that's I think where most adults are learning.
It's a very different thing when you're in front trying to impress your students. You can almost forget what it's like to be sitting in the student seat thinking, okay, what is this topic even about? Where are we going? Does anybody care about my opinion? Does anybody like, I have things also that I know about this topic that I could contribute. And is there any space for that?
If I'm sitting in a classroom as a student and I never get a chance to interact or comment or think about it, I can tune out. So, and I think that's pretty normal. I love discussion. I love some chance to talk about it. And I'm a verbal learner, so getting a chance to talk helps me sort things out in my head.
I think a lot of teachers are afraid that if they sort of open up that space
Oh, yeah.
to questions or comments or dialogue, that they will lose control of the classroom. And that feels very scary. Or what if somebody asks me a question I don't know the answer to? Or what if it starts going in a direction I don't want? So what do you think about that?
That can happen in that you were going to teach these 5 points and we started discussing on point three and like suddenly everybody wants to talk about it and you're like I got to get move on and what do I do? I've been teaching for decades. I really want to follow the energy in the room. So
Yeah.
if my students are like really into something and they're talking and discussing, I don't want to shut that down. And what I think I'm going to do is look at my objectives and the points I want to cover, and I'll be up there praying, going, okay, is there any we can skip? Can I put something to tomorrow? So I'm honestly going to rearrange my teaching and what points if there's good energy around a discussion topic. So I don't think you've lost control. I think you've found something that
Mm.
people really want to discuss and learn about.
Mhm. Oh, I love that reframing the kind of the energy and the excitement as a not a losing of control, but actually a discovering a point that people are really interested in and curious about and motivated to explore even deeper. As a teacher, that makes me feel a lot more relaxed and a lot more excited actually about the idea of opening up a conversation and even finding what people actually want to learn about.
I can think of an example. So here was something where I kind of needed to put some control maybe back, but we're talking about some theology stuff with the Trinity, and somehow I asked a question that involved relationships, and my classroom of 20-year-olds all took the relationship and then like, whoa, they like wanted to talk about a life partner and what are you looking for? So I heard this high energy, and so I gave them time to discuss that, and then I'm like, great, we could talk about this more later. And
Mhm.
now we're moving on to. So I don't think that was wrong, and I think that that discussion about relationships was wonderful. But you are able to come back on track. The
Mhm.
students loved the class because I think there was a lot of energy there.
Mhm. So one thing I've noticed sometimes in a classroom setting is if the teacher actually asks questions, that often there's like just no response or like
Crickets.
one person who's the extrovert will just like make a comment that might or may not even be related. So I'm hearing you say like dialogue is really helpful and important for adults to learn, and yet it's not always easy to actually get them to talk. So what are you noticing
Mhm.
about that?
That's a question I'll ask when I come in to teach. I'll ask the leader, like, does your group of students, do they
Mm.
like to discuss? And often they'll be like, no, they're so quiet. The teacher asks a question and it's crickets. So when that happens, what I'll often do, I think there's two things that come with that. One is you're asking good questions. You're not asking yes, no questions. Do you agree with this? Do you have any
Because no one
questions?
will ever
No.
say they don't agree.
Yeah. So open-ended questions that start with what?
Mhm.
Why, when, how. In my context, you're reading a passage of scripture, and to ask, why do you think Paul wrote this to the church?
Mhm. Mhm.
Is it's a deeper level thinking. Okay, but then they may have some great thoughts and they still don't want to talk. Right? And that for me, that's most adults. We're looking for that safe place. If I'm going to put
Mhm.
out an opinion, or I think this, but I'm only 60% sure. So I
Mhm.
am not going to say this in front of the whole class, because what I find I do all the time, especially if I'm teaching for 5 days, the first couple of days, I'll ask that question. I'll say, turn to a partner and discuss
Yes.
this. So
Yeah.
now we're in twos and it's a lot safer.
Mhm.
And then I'm listening for the energy in the room. Are they talking? Are they discussing? Are they into it? And then
Mhm.
after I've given them time to discuss it, I'll see if they're willing to talk about it in the bigger group. And often, if you've said it to your partner and they were like, that's a good idea, you might feel confident enough to go, okay, I'll share it in front of everybody.
I really like what you're saying too about the safety, feeling safe, because it really, even though we're all adults and you think people can say whatever they want, somehow when you're a student, and depending on how the teacher responds to you, it can be really vulnerable and embarrassing if you say something that they didn't want to hear or you're not answering the question the way they want. So I like what you're saying about starting with one other person and like you get the chance to kind of be like, maybe I didn't even understand what they said, or I don't even know what we're supposed to be talking about. How many times have you gotten into a little breakout group and you're like, what are we even talking about? That safety of like having a buddy to talk with. And then, like you say, once you've kind of worked through the kinks and you've chewed on it a bit, then maybe you go, oh, yeah, actually, that does contribute something to the discussion that we're now having, and you feel more free and confident to offer it in. I think it's really helpful when a teacher will let you know how long you have for a
Yes.
conversation. And I also wish that teachers gave you more time because having a 2-minute conversation about deep theological or life question is not enough time. You need like 10 minutes to have some of those conversations.
Often I will have, I would rather have, like you said, bigger chunks, like 10 minutes of discussion.
Mhm.
So I'll do that. And I'll say you've got about 10 minutes, but I'm listening to the energy in the room. Is there a high level, and I'm looking at my students, are they really interacting? And I can hear the sound shifts. I don't know how to describe this, but when they start talking about what are you doing this weekend, there's a different level of sound. Now they're talking, but they're talking about going to a
Mhm.
movie, right? And I will always give a warning when I'm in a live class. I'll be like, you've got one more minute. And I mean that. They've got one more minute to bring that to a close. So instead of cut off. So every now and then I've got super introverty internal processor people,
Mhm.
and even talking to a partner is tricky. So
Mhm.
I've learned that I will give them time to write, to like journal. I'll ask the question, I might write it on the whiteboard and give them time to write and gather their
Mhm.
thoughts, and then they're able to share with a partner and maybe bigger. So it kind of depends on the group.
I love that idea of there's different ways to give people chance to chew on the things. So the journaling, the talking with a buddy, sometimes even sitting in silence, or like I've been in
Mm.
sessions where the teacher or I as a teacher have offered objects to people or pictures, and they can pick one and kind of make a connection. So it's appealing to the different types of learning styles and the different processing. So auditory, visual, internal, external. So I think that could be really helpful for the chewing on stuff and going a bit deeper. So in conclusion, monologue versus dialogue. Main ideas. Adults do not learn very much when they're just being talked at or talked to.
We need some time and space to chew on concepts in a safe place. So maybe with a partner, maybe journaling, but smaller groups as we think about and decide, do we agree, or I like this part, or I didn't understand that. So creating that time and that space where they feel safe to offer what they're thinking about is really, really key.
Adults do love to talk, but not always when they're put on the spot or when they're not sure how it's going to be responded to. So the more safety we can create through explaining what's going to happen and expectations and timelines can like unlock people's willingness to talk about it in a way that just like putting people on the spot, who's got a question, who's got an answer, maybe may not.
Say the last thing would be follow that energy.
Mhm.
If students really get excited about one of your points, I would say it's okay to spend more time there and rearrange your teaching
Yeah.
because if they're excited and they want to talk more, they're learning and they're going to remember. And that's what we really want. Not that I got through all 9 of my points, but that they really got a hold of something and they own it themselves.
Yeah. Okay, so if you're watching this and you're wanting to improve your teaching, we have a few questions for you. So the first one is think about a time when you were a student and think about an example when you were part of a discussion that was really helpful to you and it was energizing and it deepened your learning in that session. What was that like? What do you think made that ability? Like, why did you end up in such a great conversation? What did the teacher or the facilitator do that that made it work so well?
Another thing you can think about is just your own teaching style. Do you have a tendency to go into monologue? I've got a
Mm-hmm.
lot to cover, I'm going to talk a lot. Or are you more willing for there to be dialogue between you and between students themselves? Tipping towards dialogue is probably better.
Yeah, definitely. And the third and final question would be, what points from this video stood out to you? Which ones did you find relevant or helpful or inspiring? And what would it look like for you to put this into practice next time that you are the teacher leading a session?